All right, so we're going to go ahead and read through this. We will read through it in its entirety, and then we will take it verse by verse. So let's go ahead and do it. Verse 12. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly, and I perceived that this also is but a striving after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. Let's pray. Father, we praise you that even in this life under the sun of this world that is so completely imperfect, I praise you for all your gifts that you give us to enjoy. God, I praise you that though our human understanding and our human wisdom is so lacking in every way, that you have given us your wisdom in your word. And so I pray tonight that we would see your grace. We would see how you look out after us. We would try to make sense of why everything is the way it is in this world. And God, as we sang about, I pray that we would just see how much you love us and everything that you have done for us in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Start in verse 12. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem. So last week we talked about who's the author, who wrote this book. There's actually quite a bit of speculation. If we were to look back at verse 1 of chapter 1, it says that it is the son of David, king in Jerusalem. So it says son of David. Does that mean a literal son of David? Could be. Could be the literal son of David, could be Solomon. But we know that Jesus called himself a son of David, so it could actually be anyone from David's lineage, any of the kings that came after him. It could be one of them. Some people think it's King Hezekiah. That's mostly been written off. Some people think that it was written after the exile, which would have been quite a bit after Solomon, because the Hebrew writing in it mostly resembles that time period, and people that someone wrote it like under the guise of Solomon, because that was like a literary style they did back then. I don't know. What we need to know is the early church, Judaism, all attributed this to Solomon. They believe that Solomon wrote this. He was the literal son of David, and he is more associated with wisdom than any other person in the entirety of Scripture other than Jesus. When we just read through this, if we know the Bible, it screams of Solomon to us, everything that's said here. But there are some questions, and we'll cover one of them today that is like, well, why would he say that if this is Solomon? We'll get there in a little bit. I believe Solomon wrote this, and I'm going to preach it as if Solomon wrote it. In verse 13a, he says, I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. That means he applied everything. The entirety of his being went to gaining an understanding of this world, defining the meaning of life. Those big questions. Why are we here? Why am I living in this place under that giant yellow ball in the sky? Solomon dedicated his life to finding the meaning of life by wisdom. And if there was ever a man who could do that, who by wisdom could find out the meaning of life, it would have been Solomon. We move on to verse 13. The second half there, it says, it is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. It comes from the Hebrew word ra, which means, in the HCSB, or that's the Holman Christian Standard Bible, it's miserable. It doesn't say an unhappy business. It says it's a miserable a life. The King James says sore travail. That's why I don't have a King James version in my hand right now. I don't even know what that means, really. Okay, New American Standard says grievous. NIV, a heavy burden that God has given to the children of man. The Message says it's nothing to write home about. which is always also interesting. Other places in the Old Testament say it's bad or it's even evil, what God has given man under the sun. Now, this doesn't paint God in the most favorable light, does it? Paints him as like an evil taskmaster, that he's given us all this to do. Now, we have to, like, when we go through this, you have to understand, like, he's speaking from this standpoint of all that is done under the sun, like everything that he can experience. Like, if he's just looking at life and what we know by his own revelation and what he seeks out, that's his viewpoint. That's what he gets. He's not going back and looking at the scriptures to get his knowledge. He's just looking out on all his own observations and everything he sees in this life. But we do have revelation right here. Go ahead and flip back to Genesis 1. So in Genesis 1, we have creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, okay? And then we go through all the days of creation. And if we were to start, I think it's day 2, in verse 10, let the waters in the heavens be gathered together, and let the land appear, and let there be sea and whatnot. And God, in that right there at the end, and God saw that it was good. Next, let the earth sprout vegetation. So we have vegetables and all these things and fruits and whatnot. And then you look at the end of verse 12, and God saw that it was what? Bad, raw, evil? No, good. Good. Then we go on to the next day. Let there be lights in the expanse. The moon and the sun are created. And we look at the end of verse 18, and God saw that it was good. Verse 20, and let the waters swarm with swarms of living creature. He creates fish and everything in the sea. And he looks at it and he says, and it's good. And then you go on to the next day, and the fifth day, and he creates all the living creatures. And he calls it good. And then finally he creates man and woman on day 6. And if you were to skip forward to verse 31 of chapter 1, it says, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the 6th day. So at creation, is it raw? Is it bad? Is it evil? No, it says it's very good. God looked at everything he had made, man's existence, and everything he had made for man, and he says it's very good. But here in Ecclesiastes, it says the opposite. It says it's bad. What happened between then and there? Well, Genesis 3 happened. The fall happened. Sin entered into the world and tainted this good creation that God had created. And my biggest hang-up when I was an unbeliever, when I was 20, 21 years old, and I was vehemently kind of against God, was that how could a good God, how could this good God that I hear about, that I learned about in church, how could this God who's good create a world that's so messed up, that's so evil, where messed up things happen? How could a good God create this world? I think a lot of people struggle with that question today. It might be one of the biggest issues that people have with Christianity. How could this good God create a world that's so stinking messed up? And I think it's a fair question. When you look at kids dying of cancer, when you look at the greed and the injustice, how could we not ask that question? It wasn't until I was saved, after I was saved, that I read through Genesis 1 through 3, and I read through the entirety of the Bible, and I saw that's not the case. God didn't create this world that we now know under the sun. God created a paradise. And through our sin and through our rebellion, we have turned the world into what it actually is today. Now, we can still see the goodness of God's original creation. Every time you look at a sunset and it's beautiful, or you look at a mountain pass, you're like, it's so gorgeous, it's so good. Or in May, when you get the fresh Oregon strawberries and you eat one, you're like, oh, it's so good. We have this goodness of God's creation still, but all you have to do is turn on the nightly news, and you can see what humanity has done to it. Now, the preacher, he doesn't dwell on sin here, but he does dwell on the effects of sin. And that's why he says life under the sun is raw. It's an unhappy business. If we go to Genesis 3, right after the fall, right after Adam and Eve had sinned for the first time, God comes and he calls them to court. And he addresses the serpent, and then he addresses Eve, and then this very good ground and good earth that God had made for Adam. He says this in verse 17, and he said to Adam, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. This sounds a whole lot like the preacher right here in the world that he's talking about. It's because of us and because of our sin. We're going to get a little philosophical here tonight and ask some big questions, because I like big questions. So it might lead you to say, like I say that, why does God allow it to go on this way? Why does he allow this evil world just to keep spinning around and let it keep going? Better yet, why did God allow the capacity for evil in the first place in his good creation? Why would he allow Eve to take that fruit? Why was there a tree at all? Why didn't he destroy Satan? Why did he let Satan tempt her? Why did he allow sin to take place in his good creation? I'm going to ask you this question to answer some of those questions. Who here, we got some younger people here, we got some other people who aren't married yet. Hannah and Ethan, they're engaged right now. I'll ask you this. Who grew up saying, wow, when I grow up, I want to marry a robot? Any? Oh, that's fantastic. Who wants to marry a robot that's just programmed? Let's say this, like they'll have a robot who's programmed to love you, programmed to cook for you, programmed to do everything for you, who just, you walk in the door and say, hi, honey, I missed you so much today. I love you. Give me a kiss, or something like that. I don't know what this robot says, but it programs, it tells you all your favorite jokes. Hi, honey, welcome home. Let me put on some football for you to watch. Here's some pizza. I don't know. But like this programmed robot, right? Nobody grows up wanting that. Why? Why not? Because the beautiful thing about marriage is that Ethan chose Hannah and Hannah chose Ethan. They're not programmed to do that. There's lots of other options out there. They could have picked anybody. There's 8 billion people in the world. Yet Ethan chose Hannah and Hannah chose Ethan freely. There was a nuclear catastrophe tomorrow and there's 2 people left on earth, 1 male and 1 female. That's not going to be as cool. It's not going to be as romantic, right? Because there's no options. There's no choice there. It would be pretty awkward. Hey, how you doing? Looks like it's just me and you here. I don't know. Would not be nearly as beautiful. If we were programmed by God to choose him, would that be glorifying to him? None of you wants to marry a robot. Why would God want to enter into a covenant relationship with a robot? You just see Satan saying, of course they follow you. Of course they do. Because you gave them no choice. It's like with Job, right? What Satan says to God about Job, of course Job loves you. You've blessed him with everything. How could he not? But a wedding day is beautiful because it's 2 people saying, I do. I choose you and no one else for all of eternity. And you know why it's beautiful? Because both those people have the capacity to say, I don't. And when we get to heaven, and even right now, it's 2 people. God has said, I've chosen you, Andrew. And Andrew has said, I chose you, God. I had other options. I didn't have to do that. But I choose you. Here's the deal. In order for us to have love, we have to have the capacity for apathy or for hatred. In order for us to live in the light, there has to be the capacity to live in the darkness. In order for us to do good or for there to be good, there has to be the capacity for bad or for evil. So we had home place pizza yesterday after we worked on stuff, and everyone was like, this is so good. Everyone, you eat your home place pizza, you're like, it's so good. People come from out of town, out-of-towners who grew up here, they're like, oh, it's so good. First place I'm going to home place. Getting a pizza. So good. Why do we say that? Because it's good. But why do we say it's good? You know why? Because we've had bad pizza too. And that's why we say it's so good. Or we've had bad food in general. I don't know if there is such a thing as bad pizza, but we've had bad food, and that's why we say it's so good. There's something to compare it to. Same thing you say, oh, he's a great guy, great person. You know why you say that? It's because there's evil people out there, and you're comparing them to that. So why did God allow evil into this world? I don't exactly know the mind of God. But my guess is so there could be good. Gave us the capacity to choose evil so we could choose righteousness. Why would he allow Eve to choose the fruit? So she could also freely choose him. Why allow Satan to tempt them so that they could freely choose God over Satan? Why does God allow it all to keep going on this way, which was our original question? Well, I don't know why. But we sang that song a little bit ago, King of Heaven, come down, and there is a day coming when that last piece of sand is going to fall to the bottom of the hourglass. And Christ comes back, and he lays waste this world, this place under the sun, and he makes it something new. In that day, God's bride will join him in his kingdom, and you know what we will say? We will all say, this is so stinking good. So stinking good. You know why? Because we've all had to live through this unhappy business down in the sun. If we go into verse 14, goes on into what we were talking about last week. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after wind. It's that for vanity, it's that Hebrew word habel, which means a mist, a vapor, a wind, a breath. It means it's so short. This life is so short, it's so fleeting, and also that we can't control it, we can't grasp it. Like you can't grasp the wind. You try, and it's impossible. Such is this life. What he's saying here is this search for wisdom just in the things under the sun is completely unattainable. It's in vain because we can't grasp it as human beings. He's not saying that there isn't meaning to life, but it's just that we are unable to grasp it on our own. Then verse 15 says the same kind of thing. What is crooked cannot be straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. We try and make sense of this world through our own wisdom and understanding, but it's crooked and we can't make it straight. We can't make sense of it. Then he goes on to say, what is lacking cannot be counted. If it's not there, you can't count it. We got some math whizzes in here. I want you to solve this equation for me, please. 3 plus x equals y. Please solve for x. I'll wait. Come on, it's like middle school pre-algebra. I'm sorry. You can't solve it, okay? It's unsolvable because it lacks information. It's not, Zane. It's not. You're false. You need to go take some math classes. That is an unsolvable question, okay? Because it's lacking a piece of information. Noah is a math whiz. There's no like terms, okay? I didn't want to get into a whole math class. But you cannot solve this equation because there's not enough evidence. That's what we're saying in our passage here. That's what he's saying. We try to make sense of this world, but God has not given us enough evidence to do so. God has ordered this world in a way where we can't know everything. There's mystery. We can't answer life's big questions on our own, by our own understanding, seeking it ourselves. Yet in our own fallen nature, we continue to struggle against how God has ordered it all. We try and make the crooked straight. We strive against reality. We battle reality all the time. We battle the reality that in this life we have very little control. We like to think we have lots of control, but we don't. You really don't have that much in ultimate things. And so we strive and we battle against that. We try to make what's crooked straight. We know cancer is a real thing. We know that people get cancer. Young people, old people, healthy people, non-healthy people. They get cancer and they die. But you know what I always battle against? The fact that it could be me tomorrow. I'm always so shocked when it's me. Battle against the fact that I'm going to die one day and I have no idea when that is. We struggle against it. We try to make what is crooked straight. You guys ever seen like a paper clip? I don't know why I do it, but for some reason I get a paper clip and I just want to like straighten it out. You ever done that? Or am I just a giant weirdo? Like you get a paper clip, you're like, I got to make this into a straight line. And you just take it like that, and then you can scratch stuff with it and stuff. Have you ever tried to make that paper clip into a perfectly straight line after you've bent it? Yes. Can you do it? No, it's impossible. Yes, you can't make what is crooked straight. Yet that's what we try to do with this life all the time. We struggle and we struggle and we struggle. What the preacher tells us to do throughout this book is to face reality. Stop it. Stop trying to make straight what is crooked. Instead, live with your limitations in life and face reality of what it really is. I'm going to die, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with not knowing when I'm going to die. I'm okay knowing that I'm not in control. I'm perfectly content with all that. He wants us to live in reality and stop struggling because it's all a grasping after the wind. All right. Last point, vain wisdom. We go to verse 16 through 18. In verse 16, it says, I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who are over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. So this is one of the reasons why people say they don't think it was Solomon, okay? Because it makes it sound like there would have been multiple people before him in Jerusalem. Well, Solomon, how many kings were before Solomon in Israel, in Jerusalem? One, David, his father. So this makes it sound like there was a whole bunch of people. Well, a couple of ways around that. We know that there were kings, human kings in Jerusalem prior. Melchizedek was a human king in Jerusalem prior to that. And quite frankly, he could just be talking about David. To say that like his wisdom surpassed all who were before me, if that's David, that's a pretty strong statement because David was a pretty impressive guy, and I think Solomon knew that. It's no small feat. And then if we go into verse 17, I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that also is a striving after the wind. Madness and folly, just talking about following our own carnal desires. So he sought wisdom, going the academic route, and then he just sought wisdom by just doing everything his body desired for him to do, whether it be sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever it is. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. He sought to find meaning in life in that. Then we get to verse 18. For in much wisdom it's much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. So this preacher is not anti-wisdom. He's not saying wisdom's a bad thing. If you were to go to Ecclesiastes 7 and look at verse 11 through 13, the preacher says, wisdom is good with an inheritance, an advantage to those who see the sun. For the protection of wisdom is like the protection of money, and the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of him who has it. Consider the work of God, who can make straight what he has made crooked. That's saying again. It says wisdom is good, protects us, can lead us to longer life using wisdom. He's not saying it's a bad thing, this human wisdom. But what he's telling us is also has some negatives to it. This is why a lot of people don't really care for Ecclesiastes, because they just want to know, hey, is this wisdom good or bad? Is it right or wrong? Should I pursue it or not? Tell me what to do. Preacher doesn't say it. He says almost contradictory things, and it makes you struggle with it and wrestle with it. You got to think. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. We don't like that. We want answers. We want black and white, right and wrong, good or bad, do this, don't do that. Preacher tells us in some things life is a little bit more complicated than that. So wisdom, knowledge increases sorrow. So if you go to, what was that college, and put down your $250,000, not only do you get dumber, but you get sad too. Woo! Let's go. I'm just kidding. I'm not trying to tell everyone don't go to college when you grow up. I'm just, you do what you need to do. Follow the Lord. Okay. But what does the preacher mean by this? What's he talking about? I'll tell you this story. So you guys know I work as a special ed teacher, and I had, this is years ago, I had a student who had Down syndrome. Probably his functional, his cognitive ability was that of about a 3-year-old, maybe, probably 3-year-old, 4-year-old, maybe, something like that. And I had him, and he was a senior in high school. And I still am good friends with his dad. And I didn't know him that well back then, the dad. And I remember he was just being himself, just loud and joyful, and just didn't have a care in the world, right? And the dad, I just hear him say, "Brian, you know what? Sometimes I'm really envious of him." And I thought he was joking. At the time, I kind of looked over at him, but he had that kind of dead serious expression, like you pay attention to what he just said. And I didn't understand it then, but I understand it now. I've got a 4-year-old who wakes up and just loves to go to school. He's so excited about it. He's so joyful in everything. But a time is coming when he's going to experience this world. And he's going to learn more about this world. And that's going to bring sorrow. Do you understand? Such is life under the sun. Now, we're all pretty sheltered here in Silverton, Oregon. We tend to complain about the pettiest of things. Did you see that traffic in downtown last night? It took me 3 minutes to get through downtown Silverton. I can't believe it. They got to fix that, do something. I don't know. Right? If we were to go out into the world and look at what deep, deep poverty actually looks like, heck, you could even just go to Salem and walk in the darkest places of Salem and see what goes on under the sun in the darkness. You would be absolutely overwhelmed with sorrow. The more knowledgeable we get about this fallen world, the more depressing it gets. Got another story. Right out of college, I went to Southern Oregon. I got a psychology degree, and then part of my practicum is I worked at what was called the Southern Oregon Child Study and Treatment Center. It was all kids who got kicked out of school for behavioral issues and had some tough backgrounds. And so I did 3 months of practicum there, and then they actually hired me on, and I got paid to work there. And so I worked there for maybe 6-7 months in total, and then I graduated, and it was time for me to move back here. So when they hired me on after 3 months, they asked me, "Hey, do you want to see these kids' files? It might help you work with them." And I was like, I've already got a really good relationship with these kids. I don't really want to see their files because it might mess with how I treat them, quite frankly. But I said, I think it is important, so I will look at them on my last day. And so my last day comes and goes, and I sit down in the manager's office, and she gets me the files. And I still remember her, like, she gives me the files, and she's just had this look on her face, and it's like she knew exactly what was about to happen. She's like, I know what's going to go, what he's about to experience right now. And I read about these kids' past and what they had gone through in their life. And I went out to my car, and I just cried for like an hour straight. Kids I loved, and I could not understand how they could have gone through such things. I went up to Albertina Kerr after that. I got a job up there at a mental health place it's locked down for ages 5 through 17. It was a tough job. And I worked there for 8 months. After maybe 4 or 5 months, we would get a new boy or girl in, and I kid you not, after 5 minutes, I could tell you whether they'd been sexually abused or not without looking at the file. Like, yep. I go look at the file, and yep. That's our world. The more you know, sometimes it sucks. You guys seen The Matrix? You know, Morpheus offers Neo blue pill, red pill. Red pill means you get to see what actually goes on under the sun. I'm going to show you everything that's going on right now. You might not like it, but you get the truth of everything that's going on. Blue pill means you get to stay in your comfort. You get to stay, living your nice life, and you will have no knowledge of any of it, right? And of course, Neo takes the red pill, or else that would be a pretty boring movie. Now, most of us, if we are offered that, we'd mostly say, oh, I think I'd take the red pill. I take the red pill. I want to know what's going on. But I think in reality, maybe we wouldn't. Maybe we really don't want to know what's going on behind the scenes of this world, because it would just be too troubling. The preacher here, he's not trying to persuade us to take the red or the blue pill. He doesn't have anything to say about that. He's not saying one's right, one's wrong. He's just letting you know, if you choose that red pill, if you really want to go there, there's going to be sorrow, because you're going to have a better understanding of this life under the sun, and you're not going to like it. So I have up here vain wisdom. What is vain wisdom? If we look at verse 16, 17, we see where he's coming from here. He says, I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. And my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom, to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is but a striving after wind. You see this. He's relying on himself in this whole journey to go out there and to find out what is the meaning of life. It's all about me. I'm going to do it myself. My heart. Based on his own inclinations, his own observations, his own revelations. Now, the Bible is not against wisdom. Let's say that. But we must delineate between human and godly wisdom. Go ahead and open up to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Verse 18, Paul writes, for the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through folly of what we preach to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs and Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and folly to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. Human wisdom is foolishness to God. It may help you with survival in the here and now. It may help you gain things in the here and now, but in the grand scheme of things, human wisdom is absolutely worthless unless you know God. But the Bible speaks of another kind of wisdom. Go ahead and open up to Proverbs chapter 1. And this wisdom is to be treasured and to be sought with all of our being. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7, it says this, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's the fool who despises wisdom and instruction. Wisdom and instruction from whom? From God. It is the fool who says, I'm going to go out it my own way and do my own thing and try to figure this life out on my own, by my own journey. Go ahead and go to chapter 9, verse 10 of Proverbs. You see the same statement. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. What's true wisdom? It's to know God. To know that there is a God who created everything, who is all-powerful, who is that great, and I am not he. That is the beginning of wisdom. You can have 25 PhDs, and if you don't know that, you're a fool. Now, when I was a young man, I sought the same thing. I'll probably talk about it last week. I definitely sought folly and madness. I can tell you that much. But I tried to make sense of this world on my own, and all it did was lead to sorrow. It was not until I surrendered to God and I feared him that everything in my life started to make sense. And we have such a great God that he has not left us to find wisdom on our own, but he has graciously revealed it to us right here. The Bible shows us who God is. It gives us knowledge of the Holy One. It shows us what he's done, and it shows us the life that he has called us to. We don't need to venture out on our own to try and go discover wisdom, but you can hold it right in the palm of your hand. Now, I just want to end with this. This fallen world, I put my equation up there again. That's what that was, that little note down there. Now it makes sense. What's the answer here, everyone? 4, right? I don't know what I was going to do with that. You can study your math. Oh, yeah. When we throw in God's revelation, the world does make sense. It's not all grasping at the wind when we don't seek our own understanding, but when we get our understanding, our knowledge, our wisdom from God. All right, last part. This is a fallen world and it's sorrowful. Yet even in the midst of this fallen world, God gives us good gifts that are to be enjoyed, even though we deserve none of it. Now each and every one of us has contributed to the decay of God's creation by our own rebellion, by our own sin. And because of that, for the next 80 years or so, however long God gives us, we are left to live under this sun with the consequences of it. But thankfully, this is not the end-all be-all. 2,000 years ago, God sent his Son to deal with the sin problem, to fix that which is crooked. Jesus came down here and he experienced this fallen world. He saw how sad it was. He wept over this world time and time again. He suffered in this world time and time again. Yet he never contributed to the sin problem, yet he came to save us from it. He went to the cross and he paid our penalty on that cross in full, for Eve's sin, for Adam's sin, for Solomon's sin, for my sin, for your sin. On the cross, he took the wrath of God in my place as my substitute. He died, he rose again, and he promised to return and bring paradise back to earth, to give this dying world new life, a new creation. You know, if you're here tonight and you haven't put your faith in Christ, that he offers you the same exact thing, new life. Not just life in this dying world. Go ahead and turn to Luke 23 and we'll end here. Go to verse 32. So if you look at Matthew's gospel, it talks about these two thieves. Jesus is being crucified, and it says there was two thieves, one on his right, one on his left, and that both of them were mocking him. They were both mocking him at one point, but something changed along the way. 32. 2 others who were criminals were led away to be put to death with him. And when they came to the place that is called the Skull, there they crucified him, and the criminals, one on the right and one on his left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they cast lots to divide his garments, and the people stood by watching. But the ruler scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others, let him save himself, if he is the Christ of God, his chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who were hanged railed at him, saying, "Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other one rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due rewards of our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." And he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And he said to him, "Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." Here's a thief. We don't really know much about him, but it seems that almost 99.99% of his life, he'd gone against God, and he had chosen the serpent's ways and not God's. And yet here he is dangling on a cross, and he looks over and he sees who Jesus truly is. And he puts his faith in him, he repents, and he gives him the promise, which is what? Tonight you will be with me in paradise, the way it was always supposed to be. Let's pray.